Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. The Prime Minister was not in the House of Commons today, despite the fact this could be a very consequential week for Justin Trudeau. On Wednesday, a group of Liberal MPs will reportedly confront the Prime Minister at their weekly caucus meeting, expected to ask questions about his dismal polling numbers and his leadership. Last week, another veteran Liberal MP said it is time for the Prime Minister to step down as party leader, though Trudeau's defenders say he is still the best person for the job.
This is a guy who day after day after day gets attacked and punched and denigrated, and and he just steps up every day with the interests of the heart and in the interests of the country in his heart. And I have enormous amount of respect for him. The guy who showed up through the pandemic, the guy who's showing up through these incredibly difficult times in the world. Look, there's no incumbent government that's got it easy. The easy thing for him to do would be to walk away, right? But the challenges are too big, and I think the reason he stays is because he believes he's the right person for these times, and I believe that too.
Well, joining us now to talk about this are Susan Delacourt, journalist and columnist with the Toronto Star, and Stephen Maher, journalist and author of the best-selling political book, The Prince, The Turbulent Reign of Justin Trudeau. Hello to both of you.
Hi, nice to be here.
Listen, let's begin with this caucus revolt. And I'll get you to start us off here, Susan, because, as we said, on Wednesday, we're expecting this confrontation to happen during the caucus meeting. Just how consequential, how big of a revolt are we talking about here?
Well, I'm finding it hard to figure that out because, I've covered past revolts before. And this one is weird in that we've been expecting MPs to confront the Prime Minister going back to, summer of 23. I went down to London to that caucus meeting. We thought for sure it would happen then. It didn't happen when they all went out to BC this year. So why now? And what is the event that has triggered it? I had thought there were events before now that would. So I'm still trying to, I know this isn't a great journalistic answer, but I'm still trying to figure out how real this is, because it seems like Justin Trudeau weaves this kind of magic where suddenly he's in a room with them and everybody loses their voice. So will it be a letter presented to him in caucus in front of the others? Will somebody go to the media? Or will this all just fade away? Any of those bets are on right now.
Okay, so something we're watching. Although, Stephen, in terms of the major question being asked here, because with or without that magic that Susan's talking about, here you have a Prime Minister who has been trailing in the polls and trailing badly by 20 points for over a year now, and he's being questioned whether or not he should still be leader, both within his caucus and Liberals outside his caucus. So you, who have worked on this book, why does he choose to stay? Why doesn't he not move on when really the political calculus doesn't seem to foretell great things for him going down into another election?
Well, he's got an extraordinary confidence. One of his former cabinet ministers described it as being like a superpower. And if you look at his political career, he repeatedly, over and over again, has, I don't know if I would say triumphed, but prevailed after people were counting him out. If you consider that even the fact that he's Prime Minister, when his qualifications for that, aside from his family connections, were his experience as a former high school teacher and a backbench member of Parliament, it was his confidence that thrust him to his current position, and it sustained him through great difficulties, through a boxing match, through various scandals, blackface and SNC-Lavalin. He's been a fighter. He sees himself as a fighter. I believe this situation is different because he's now fighting gravity, this kind of seemingly immovable public fatigue with him, and he's bringing the same attitude to that he brought to earlier circumstances where there was a way for him to prevail. I don't see him prevailing this time.
Don't see him prevailing. And I wonder, Stephen, staying with you, I wonder whether or not he should be looking closely at what happened in British Columbia this past weekend, because here's David Eby, the NDP leader, facing possibly being pushed out of government over a lot of the same criticisms and issues that Trudeau is being criticized about: affordability, housing, crime. How worried should the Prime Minister be about the BC experience if he faces the same kind of criticisms?
Well, I think he is likely taking heart at BC because the BC NDP, the incumbents there are still holding on, whereas and they received nearly half the vote. Where it's projected in all the polls that the Liberals would receive 26% of the vote if there was a federal election now, which would see them wiped out. So he may be looking at BC and saying, "Look, I've got a hope." But I do not believe that there's the same kind of fatigue with EB as there is with Trudeau. I think it would be hard to exaggerate how many Canadians just are tired of him and want him to go away. I'm in Ottawa today, but I'm normally resident in Atlantic Canada. And I think it's interesting that this rebellion seems to be centered in that area, which was once so warm and welcoming to him. And now you have an MP like Sean Casey in Charlottetown coming out and taking what's an extraordinary step when you think about it, given that Sean Casey, presumably wants to hold that seat. He's now put himself in the position where he's going to have to campaign and say, I don't think my candidate should be prime minister, but I'm still running for office anyway. So the people who are opposed to him are saying so, I believe, because they're getting that from the public.
Mm-hmm. Susan, you talk about this magic that Trudeau weaves whenever he's in front of his fellow caucus members. I'm wondering how much of that has to do with the fact that there is no heir apparent if Trudeau were to step aside.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think they've been watching, and I think we should watch closely what's going on in the United States, because they replaced a leader, and, we're going to see in about 2 weeks whether that worked. And I think that might have some influence on Trudeau's thinking. I think if Trump wins, the chances are bigger that he'd want to stick around and fight Trump and Poilievre. But I think if Kamala wins, there may be something there for them to say, and again, I'm just guessing here, but there may be something in there for them to say, okay, look, they pulled off a switch, but there is no, the comparison ends there, as you say, though, because there is no heir apparent. Mark Carney is seen as that, but I've been cautioning people, do not see him as the Paul Martin to the Jean Chrétien. This is not the same kind of fight. There are others who will vie for Trudeau's job. Christy Clark has said now, I'm sure we could rattle off names of others, but none of them are, household names and certainly not charismatic.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there is a lot of focus on the Wednesday caucus meeting, Stephen, but the Prime Minister will also be looking at a cabinet shuffle now that we know that several of his cabinet ministers will not be running for re-election. Do you think that shuffle will serve to silence critics who may otherwise want Trudeau to step aside?
That's the calculation. I was doing some math recently. There's 153 Liberal members of Parliament, 38 cabinet ministers, 38 parliamentary secretaries, and I think 20-some committee chair people and a handful of House officers. You end up having only about 50 true backbenchers, people who don't receive some kind of a stipend from the government. That's a fairly small group to hold a rebellion. And if he can get some more of them on side by dangling a cabinet position, could that take the steam out of this process? The news broke about this while he was in the air. Now, once he came back, he and his people were able to make moves and apply pressure and twist arms. I don't believe it has killed the revolt, but we won't really know how much steam they've been able to take out of it until we see what happens on Wednesday.
Susan, what do you think about this possible cabinet shuffle? How much do you think that will blunt the criticism against the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I have an old joke is, what do you call Liberals who don't get into cabinet? Anonymous sources. And
God love them.
Yes, thank you, anonymous Liberal. So right now they're, I don't want to portray it as craven, but I'm sure they're going to be, if there is a confrontation on Wednesday, there will be a lot of those people, the numbers that Steve names, who are saying, should I yell at the Prime Minister or should I get into cabinet? And I think that will be going on.
Okay.
Wouldn't be human if they didn't.
Well, of course, we're going to watch as this is the start of a consequential week for Justin Trudeau. Susan Delacourt, Stephen Maher, thank you for this.
Thanks.
Thank you.